Healing doesn't begin in your body, it begins in your mouth, and that truth challenges everything the natural mind has been trained to believe. Most people are conditioned to trust what they feel more than what they say. They wake up, check their bodies, measure their strength, and then speak according to the report they receive from their senses. If they feel weak, they speak weakness. If they feel pain, they speak pain. And without realizing it, they establish a pattern where their words become a constant agreement with their condition instead of a declaration of change. What they are experiencing may be real, but what they are saying is what gives it permission to stay or the command to leave. There is a powerful connection between the heart and the mouth that many overlook. Words are not empty expressions. They are carriers of belief, direction, and authority. When a person continually speaks based on feelings alone, they are allowing temporary conditions to dictate permanent outcomes. That's why two people can face the same situation, yet walk away with completely different results. One speaks what they feel and remains bound by it, while the other chooses to speak beyond what they feel and begins to rise above it. The difference is not in the circumstance, it is in the confession. The mouth becomes the steering wheel of life. It directs the course, sets the tone, and establishes the atmosphere a person lives in. If the words are filled with defeat, limitation, and doubt, then that is the environment that begins to dominate. But if the words are filled with life, strength, and expectation, something begins to shift internally even before it is visible externally. Many people underestimate the impact of what they say daily. Casual words, repeated often enough, shape beliefs, and beliefs eventually produce results. It's not about denying reality. It's about choosing a higher reality to agree with. Speaking life doesn't mean pretending that symptoms don't exist. It means refusing to give them the final authority. When a person learns to speak in alignment with truth rather than in agreement with fear, they step into a different flow of power. Their words stop echoing the problem and start establishing the solution. And this is where healing truly begins, not at the point of physical evidence, but at the moment of verbal alignment. What you say consistently becomes what you expect, and what you expect influences what you receive. If the expectation is built on negative confession, the outcome will follow that same direction. But if expectation is built on words of faith and authority, the results will begin to reflect that shift over time. This is why guarding your words is not optional. It is essential. Every statement is either moving you closer to restoration or further into limitation. Every word spoken is setting something in motion, whether seen or unseen. There is a spiritual law at work, whether a person recognizes it or not, and that law responds to words with precision and consistency. Words are not just sounds that fade into the air. They are containers filled with belief, intention, and direction. When spoken repeatedly, they begin to shape the inner world of a person and influence the outer results they experience. Many people live unaware of this law, yet they are constantly activating it through their daily speech. They speak casually about their condition, their fears, and their limitations, not realizing that those very words are reinforcing the circumstances they want to escape. When words are aligned with fear, they carry the weight of that fear into the heart. Over time, those repeated expressions settle deep within, forming strongholds of belief that become difficult to break. A person may say, "This always happens to me," or "I'll never get better," thinking it's just a moment of honesty, but those statements begin to establish a pattern. The mind starts to accept them as truth, the emotions begin to follow, and the body often responds accordingly. What began as a simple statement turns into a cycle that feeds itself over and over again. On the other hand, when words are aligned with truth and spoken with conviction, they begin to produce a different kind of result. Even if the heart is not fully convinced at first, the repetition of those words starts to reprogram the inner belief system. The mind begins to shift, the expectation begins to change, and a new direction is established. This is why consistent confession is so powerful. It is not about empty repetition, but about building a new reality from the inside out. Each word spoken in faith is like placing another brick in a foundation that will eventually support visible change. Many people struggle because their words are divided. In one moment they speak life, and in the next they speak doubt. This inconsistency disrupts the flow of what they are trying to establish. It is like planting a seed one day and digging it up the next to see if it is growing. The process requires stability and commitment. Words must be guarded carefully because every contradiction weakens the direction that has been set. When a person becomes disciplined in their speech, choosing to align every statement with what they desire rather than what they fear, they begin to cooperate fully with this law. Authority is released through agreement. When your words consistently agree with limitation, you empower that limitation. When your words consistently agree with truth, you empower that truth to work in your life. This is not about perfection, but about direction. It is about making a conscious decision to let your speech serve your purpose, rather than sabotage it. Over time, the accumulation of those aligned words begins to create momentum, and that momentum starts to carry a person into a different experience than they once knew. You may feel nothing when you first begin to speak life, and that can be one of the greatest challenges to overcome because the human tendency is to look for immediate confirmation. When there is no visible change, no emotional uplift, and no physical improvement, the mind begins to question whether anything is actually happening. It whispers that the effort is pointless, that the words are empty, and that nothing will ever shift. This is the exact moment where many people stop, not because the process isn't working, but because it isn't working in a way they can immediately perceive. They mistake silence for failure and stillness for inactivity, not realizing that some of the most powerful transformations begin in ways that cannot be seen or felt at first. Just like a seed planted deep in the soil, the early stages of growth are completely hidden from the natural eye. There is no visible evidence above the ground, yet beneath the surface, development is already taking place. Roots are forming, structure is being established, and life is beginning to emerge in a way that will eventually break through. Words spoken in faith operate in a similar way. When you begin to declare life, strength, and restoration, even in the absence of feeling, you are planting something that carries the potential for change. Each repetition reinforces that seed, pressing it deeper into the heart and allowing it to take hold. The problem is that many people dig up their own seed through doubt-filled speech. They speak life in one moment, but when they feel nothing, they reverse their confession and begin to speak discouragement. This interrupts the process and delays the manifestation of what has already been set in motion. The unseen realm responds to consistency, not occasional effort. It responds to words that are spoken with persistence, even when there is no immediate feedback. This is where discipline becomes more important than emotion. You must continue speaking what is true, regardless of what you feel, because feelings are often the last thing to align with change. Silence can be deceptive. Just because you don't feel a shift doesn't mean a shift isn't occurring. In fact, the absence of feeling often indicates that the work is happening at a deeper level. The foundation is being strengthened, the internal resistance is being broken down, and new patterns are being established. This stage requires patience and trust in the process. It requires a willingness to continue declaring life even when everything around you seems unchanged. Over time, what was once unseen begins to surface. The words that were spoken consistently start to produce visible results. The inner transformation becomes an outer reality, and what once required effort begins to feel natural. But that transition only happens for those who refuse to quit in the stage where nothing appears to be happening, for those who understand that the absence of feeling is not the absence of progress, and who choose to keep speaking life until what they have declared becomes what they experience. Faith speaks before it sees, and that principle goes against everything that the natural senses demand. The human mind wants evidence first. It wants proof, confirmation, and something tangible to hold on to before it agrees to believe. But faith operates in a completely different order. It does not wait for visible results to begin speaking. It speaks because it believes, and it continues to speak until what is believed becomes what is seen. This is where many people struggle because they are trying to reverse the process. They are waiting to see improvement before they change their words, but real change begins when the words shift first. When a person learns to speak from a place of belief rather than from a place of observation, they step into a higher level of authority. Their words are no longer tied to circumstances. They begin to rise above them. Instead of echoing what is happening, they begin to establish what should happen. This is not denial of reality, but a refusal to let reality have the final say. There is a difference between acknowledging a situation and surrendering to it. Faith acknowledges what is present, but speaks what is promised, creating a tension between the current condition and the desired outcome. Speaking before seeing requires conviction. It requires a decision to stand firm even when everything appears unchanged. The mind may present arguments, the body may present symptoms, and the environment may present contradictions, but faith remains steady in its confession. It continues to declare strength in the presence of weakness, restoration in the presence of damage, and life in the presence of decline. This consistency begins to shift the internal atmosphere. What once felt impossible starts to feel attainable, and what once felt distant begins to feel near. There is a creative force released when words are spoken in alignment with belief. Those words begin to shape perception, influence expectation, and direct focus. Instead of being consumed by what is wrong, the mind begins to engage with what is possible. This shift is not just psychological. It carries a deeper impact that touches every area of a person's being. The body responds to what the mind consistently accepts, and the mind is heavily influenced by what the mouth repeatedly declares. Many people underestimate the power of speaking ahead of results because it requires persistence without immediate reward. It demands that a person stay committed to their confession even when there is no visible progress. But this is exactly where the breakthrough is formed. The repeated declaration builds momentum. Each word adds weight to the direction being established. Over time, that momentum begins to overcome resistance, and what once stood firm begins to give way. It is in this process that faith proves its strength, not when everything is already aligned, but when nothing appears to be changing and the words remain consistent. Speaking before seeing is not a one-time act. It is a continual posture. It is a daily decision to align speech with belief rather than with circumstances, to let words lead the way instead of following behind what is already visible.